Good Friday there, football fans, and welcome to the latest edition of Fast Money Football. I'm James Sharman. I'll be joined by Albert Vartanian shortly. But today, to start things off, I want to talk about a footballer who is also one of the great human beings, maybe the classist act in not just English football, not just European football, maybe world sport, and that is Marcus Rashford. Rashford's going through a real tough time right now. And the question is it just a slight blip in a 24-year-old's career? It happens. Or is it actually a major decline, something to be worried about? Don't forget, Rashford was really the first big hope in the post Sir Alex Ferguson era. A homegrown boy from the area, broke through with much aplomb and was just a wonderful player. Blistering pace, tricky, had a great shot, great vision, and in 297 games, 93 goals. Pretty decent. And as I mentioned, they're off the pitch, a real class actor. He actually forced government reform regarding school meals for kids in poverty during COVID. He's got the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, for whatever that's worth, on his speed dial in his phone. They talk all the time. He's a really important figure, I think, in English sport, and maybe one of those guys that when he does finally retire might enter politics. At the very least, he will affect change elsewhere. He's that kind of personality. But listen, he's a footballer, and we judge him as a footballer in many regards, and that's fair enough because this year, and even going back to last season somewhat, he's been a shadow of his former self. Now, I know he started this campaign with shoulder surgery, but since returning in October, just 5 goals, and he's become really a bench warmer under Ralph Rangnick, starting just 2 of the past 7 games. And when he's come off recently for Manchester United, he's provided zero spark. And this is a kind of player with his pace you would think would be perfect coming off the bench, if not starting these matches. So what happened to Marcus Rashford? Every analytic is down right now. Everything from his previous seasons. The one in particular that stands out to me is a stat that I don't usually take much, time consuming, and that is successful dribbles. It doesn't always mean that much, but certain players it does mean a lot. And with a guy like Rashford, who over the past number of seasons has been so great with the ball at his feet, showing that pace, breaking out wide, beating players. This season, 1.65 successful dribbles per game compared to 2.22 over the course of his career. That to me says everything. The guy has no confidence. He's still a specimen. He can still, beat most players through pace, but something's gone really wrong there. And then moving forward, even this week in the Champions League loss to Atletico Madrid, he was heckled by fans throughout the match. And post-match, walking to his car, he was heckled. And then, of course, there were photographs of him flipping the bird to some of the fans as he reacted, which is really unlike him. And, of course, these fans, I mean, that's the story in itself, how these fans can heckle a player for 90 minutes. And when they see him on the street, and then the second one of these players responds and backs themselves, they get all upset about it. You can't do that. We're fans. That drives me up the wall. But it comes to the point where the players now have to apologize on social media, which is what Rashford did this week as well, which I don't understand. You don't need to do that. But it's a real shame for Marcus Rashford because I like this guy a lot. As I mentioned, on the field, when he's on top form, when he's confident, he's an England international. He's been dropped by England now as well. I hope he refines his form. It could be outside Manchester United. We've discussed before, there's going to be a fire sale, I think, there this summer when they find a new manager. And maybe it's time Rashford finds a new address to find his form once again. Or maybe he's the solution with a new manager. I don't know, but when I look at world sport, and there's so many characters, so many heels, shall we say, there's also a lot of really good guys, and Rashford's one of them, and I want to see him succeed. Even though he plays for my favorite club's arch enemies. But when I put my broadcaster hat on and I'm objective, I want to see Rashford succeed wherever it is. It's a real shame. His teammate Jadon Sancho, also has been dealt with poorly this season. Hasn't played well for much of his first year at United, but he's now finding his form with 2 goals and 3 assists in his last 6 games. He's also been dropped by England as well. So maybe getting a few days off out of town for these youngsters will be really good for them. Bottom line is, I would just stay away from United when gambling these days because I don't know what to expect from them. They're not very good for most weeks, but now and again they put in a good performance. Marcus Rashford, we have you back here on Fast Money Football. It is an FA Cup weekend, of course. I love the FA Cup. Not too many small clubs left, although Nottingham Forest is still in the FA Cup, of course, meeting Liverpool this weekend. And the term quadruples and trebles is being talked about. Wherever you read, these terms are making their ugly faces present in the football dialogue. That's because, of course, Manchester City are on course for potentially a treble, the FA Cup, the Champions League, and of course the Premier League. Liverpool are on course for a quadruple because they won the Carabao Cup already, right? It seems every year, the last number of years, these stupid terms have come up, usually around Man City. And usually when they come up within a couple of weeks, they've lost a match. They've bowed out of a cup tournament because it's next to impossible to create these feats these days, I think, in modern football. We saw United do it in 1999, the treble, not a quadruple, the treble. Bayern Munich's done it in Germany. Barca's done the treble, of course, in Spain. But quite frankly, they're easier. It's tougher in England because there's more games and more cups. But still, can we just forget about these quadruples and trebles, all this nonsense? Because it's so unfair on a team. It could be that City bow out to Southampton, for example, in the FA Cup this weekend, and there it goes. Sorry, no more treble talk. Just the double, not good enough. And as for Liverpool against Forest, well, they should win that game, obviously, but Forest is a pretty good team in the League Championship these days. But the romantic in me, the one that loves the Champions League and loves the FA Cup because of the past glories, I think this matchup, Forest-Liverpool, sounds just great. It really does. Forest were a powerhouse back in the 70s and 80s. And now they're playing Liverpool, of course, a powerhouse in the 70s and 80s, and now in the 20s. It just feels right. It sounds right. And it also casts your memory back to, of course, the Hillsborough disaster back in 89 when these two met in the FA Cup semi-finals, of course. So it's tinted with sadness, this matchup. One stat actually is quite amazing is Jurgen Klopp enjoying his first ever FA Cup quarterfinal. Think about that. Jurgen Klopp and all the successes out of Liverpool in the last 6 years or so, is his first ever quarterfinal in the FA Cup. He really, really wants this one. All right, let's bring in now Albert Vartanian. Albert.
So we're going to go back to attack and defend like we did last week. I have 3 bets for you. We're going to focus on the FA Cup. That Jurgen Klopp stat really kind of blew my mind. I did not
crazy, right?
know. Yeah, it's crazy. You figure Liverpool is at least getting into the semis year in and year out, but clearly that's not the case. But let's start with a big matchup. Southampton at home at St. Mary's to Manchester City. Southampton, big underdog, 7-1. Man City minus 295, rightfully so. You have a top of the table, mid-table team here. But as much as I think Man City will win this game, I don't think they're going to blow out the Saints. I'm going to go Saints plus 1.5, so don't lose by more than 1 goal at even money, James.
Yeah, I think I might attack this one somewhat. I mean, listen, I know the Saints have dropped 3 straight games after a really good run, where I think they probably look better than they actually are. Listen, I love the manager, Hassan Hoodle. I like this team. It's a good team, but it's a mid-table team, right? They were playing like they're a European team for a while there, beating some teams that perhaps, weren't on top form themselves. But the attack's really dried up right now. I don't know where the goals are coming from, whereas City, for me, are really due for a breakout. City haven't played well of late, back-to-back 0-0s, which is crazy for this team, right? There's nothing wrong with their defense. It's the goals have kind of dried up for City as well. So I see a low-scoring affair in this one, and I very much see, obviously City progressing to the next round here. But it could be interesting. Southampton have their moments. We know that, but I think it's pretty obvious what will happen in this one.
They've done pretty well against City recently, actually. They drew 1-1 at home, 0-0 away. Their only big beating that they got actually came last season, 5-2. Before that, 1-0 win, and then a 2-0 loss to Manchester City. I think City's going to win, and that's the danger about betting against City, is that on any given day, they can put 4, 5, 6 past you. I mean, against Palace, if you really watch that game, as good as Palace were, City probably could have had 3 or 4 that day. But I do like this. I think the dip in form for Saints in the league is because they had one eye on this FA Cup. They're safe in the league. There's nothing going to happen there. I think all their eggs are in this basket. And that's the reason behind this bet. But I'm with you, James. I think it could get ugly, as it usually does with Manchester City. Moving on to another one, a big game and a big win yesterday for Everton. They take on Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park. Palace are favored plus 115, Everton plus 285. The draw is plus 225. This is a quick turnaround for Everton, playing on a Thursday night and now heading into the weekend. I'm just going straight up here. Crystal Palace to win, plus 115.
Yeah, I think I'll defend this one. Palace should be favourites, right? But, and this is what's kind of like, when I overthink things, and that's why I never win money when I gamble. I overthink things sometimes, right? As you mentioned there, Everton beat Newcastle. Yeah. In a huge win. I mean, it's a crazy game, by the way. I mean, the 99th minute, I think 40 minutes of injury time because that fan came out and strapped himself to the goalpost. Is there anything more Newcastle Everton than that? I don't know what it is. But that match, aside from that nonsense, it was a brutal, desperate game of hard tackling. Like, Everton were playing for their lives. Everton were playing for their manager, Frank Lampard, in this one as well. This could be one of those springboards, for something better. Because as we discussed before, we think Everton are better than a relegation team, if not a great team. But it could be one of those springboards. But then I look at the numbers and the selections, the injuries. Jordan Pickford's got COVID right now, which is why I think Palace should be favorites. But with Palace, it's weird, Albert, because I keep going back to my preseason predictions and I have Palace going down in a very long season for them. And they've just surprised me every single week. They're hard to beat. I think Patrick Vieira's done a wonderful job there, which is why they should be favorites in this one. Just seeing Lampard and Vieira on the sidelines, brings me back to a simpler time, before wars and before pandemics, and when England's golden generation was disappointing and Vieira and Lampard were battling on the field, So I'm going to just look back and have some nostalgia and enjoy that, I think, this weekend.
Yeah, it'll be a really good game. If I want to ask you this, if you're an Evertonian fan, I know you support Liverpool, but let's just take that away. If you're an Evertonian fan, and I said at the beginning of the season, would you rather have an FA Cup or stay in the Premier League? What would you say?
Oh, you see, this is a great question, by the way, because, a trophy is a trophy, and you never forget those days at Wembley, when you return and when you win that trophy, your whole big ears up, it's one of those moments you never forget, and it can really justify your team as the reason why you love the game. However, in the modern day, you go down to the League Championship, man, it could be a fast descent even further. Depending on where your books are at and the contracts you have, we've seen some really big clubs sink, and not get back up. And that's not good. So I would say, sadly, as much as I love the FA Cup, sadly, these days, I think survival is more important than winning a cup for a team like Everton. Because Everton's got trophies. They have won before. They've won league crowns, right? If you're a Brentford, for example, right? Or if you're, a Norwich and you've won nothing ever, then getting that cup means more, I think, to them than survival. Wigan, remember Wigan won the FA Cup a number of years ago?
Bruno Martinez, right?
That's right, yeah. And then they went down soon after. I mean, those Wigan fans will always have that day at Wembley, always. And they're not really a Premier League quality team. So for them, that's fine. But for an Everton, you got to survive. You just have to.
Yeah, it's a sad truth, but I have an Everton, a Wigan fan who still talks about that. That is like one of the most important things that ever happened to that club.
There is one in Canada, a Wigan fan?
Yes, there is, surprisingly.
I joke.
Random fans just popping out of everywhere in Toronto. That's a great thing about Toronto, is that it's so multicultural. You never know what you're going to run into.
Yeah, no, you're right. Having done this game, covered it for so many years, it's always amazing when I, bump into some guy in the street who's, a fan of, Scunthorpe. He's got a Scunthorpe. Wow, are you serious? There's one of them here as well. It's great.
Swindon Town, one of those teams.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm with you, though. I mean, if you saw the fans, if you watched that game yesterday, they were every single ball. They were all over it. You saw how much it meant for them to get behind that team, and to get that result down a man was fantastic. But heading into this matchup, I got to throw some stats out. Worst away record, Everton, just one win in the Premier League, just 3 points up on Watford, like we mentioned. Because Everton is heading into an international break, I think we can see Lampard field a strong side, but there's some issues. Allen was sent off in that game against Newcastle, straight red, which probably shouldn't have been a straight red. We can talk about that, but 3 games. So he's out for this matchup. Donny van de Beek, Dele Alli, and El Ghazi are all cup tied. So that midfield's looking a little short. We're probably going to have Doucouré and Gomes. So I'm just not liking the way the team's going to line up. And I think Palace, they're all like Southampton. I think they're all in on this. And that's why I really see them taking it to Everton. But as you said, some momentum on Everton's side. You never know what can happen in an FA Cup night.
No, you're right. But then I'd also look forward to the games coming up for Everton. And,
Right.
as I mentioned, what's more important to the Frank Lampard, right? It's
Yeah.
the league. They've got a tough schedule coming up. They're at West Ham next time out. Then they're at Burnley, which is never easy. Then they're against United at Goodison. Palace as well in the league, which is interesting. They got Leicester. They got Liverpool. They got Chelsea. They got Leicester again. They've got Arsenal to close the season. So, I mean, that's a nightmarish schedule, really, for this team if they want to survive. So they may have, the eyes very much on, let's just survive. Let's rest some players, as you mentioned, having players cup tied, which I don't like, by the way. I hate that rule.
It's
It's actually crazy. I mean, you're playing for Everton now. And it's not as if Dele and Van der Beek were, integral members of their previous clubs in this tournament, right? So, it's tough goes for Everton right now for sure. But that was a huge win, and maybe it's a springboard.
Yeah, and that run-in for Everton is difficult also because a lot of those teams have a lot to play for. I mean, you get Burnley and Watford who are battling them for the relegation race. You get Arsenal and Manchester United who are going to be fighting for top 4. Very difficult. So it'll be a tough run to the end of the season. Big result, though, against Newcastle. Let's move on to a Premier League fixture, which I think this is actually going to be a really entertaining game. Leicester City at home, plus 120 against Brentford, plus 235. I think this is actually closer to a pick'em game, to be completely honest with you. My bet here, though, I'm staying away from the winner's market. Both teams to score, James, plus over 2.5 goals. You get that around even money.
Yeah, I'm going to attack this one. I think it's going to be a good game. I agree with you. Entertaining, but I don't see that many goals. I see a really cagey affair. Combined, these two teams, the last 10 games, haven't scored more than 2.5 goals in those games, right? So they are low-scoring games overall. I know 3 points separate these two as well on the table, but Brentford's played 3 more games. So in the table, it means a lot right now, which often means cagey affairs. I think Leicester have really stepped up. I know they lost last time out, but they won 4 of the past 5 games. I think Brendan Rodgers is a class act. He maybe shouldn't have been linked with Manchester United the last couple of months. That's kind of nonsense. But he's a good manager. He's had a real tough go this year. He's had defense has been just destroyed through injuries. That centre-back partnership hasn't been there once, I don't think, this season. No. So I see a low-scoring affair regardless, a cagey affair. And I see a Leicester winning this one. Brentford, listen, they bounced back last week. Fantastic win for them. But I think Leicester's a better team, bottom line.
Yeah, a lot of injuries for Leicester City. You can add Wilfred Ndidi and Mark Albrighton picked up injuries. On Thursday, they played in the Conference League, the Europa Conference League. They lost that game, but they're through to the next round. But at a cost. I mean, now you add Ndidi, Albrighton, Castagna, Bertrand, Vardy, Evans, Soyuncu, Daka, right? Pereira is doubtful. Soumare is doubtful. And on the Brentford side, if you're looking at statistics, just 2 clean sheets in 24. So I think both these sides have defensive issues clearly, and they have goal scorers either way. So that's kind of where I'm leaning with that. And Ivan Toney, if there's a player who's probably the happiest in the world to have Christian Eriksen on his team, it's him. 5 goals in 2. And obviously we saw that beautiful goal against Burnley at the weekend. I just like the way Brentford are playing, and I'm really happy that Christian Eriksen's playing in the Premier League.
Yeah, Brentford's the feel-good story, isn't it? For numerous reasons this season. And Eriksen just coming. He's almost like the perfect club for him to come into because everyone likes Brentford. Who are they? This small club doing it their own way, haven't got an academy, relying on analytics. And then they bring in Eriksen and that story. And you mentioned Toney. I said that first week of the season, I think he scored a goal or 2. And I said, this guy is going to be a monster if he stays healthy. And he could be on the move to a bigger club in the summertime. I think that could happen. He's a great story as well. So, yeah, I get both teams to score, absolutely. But I can see a draw in this one, actually, in a 1-1 type scenario.
Do you think suitors are going to be flying around Christian Eriksen come the end of the season? Big clubs?
Yeah, good question. He's been recalled to Denmark, right? Have you seen that? And which is amazing. I mean, that's more, forget his form. He's only played a couple of games, but again, it's a feel-good story. Maybe, before what happened at Euro, he was considered one of the classy players in Europe, was really finding his feet at Inter Milan after a really slow start there. So maybe he's just really happy to ease back into professional life. Maybe he's really happy and thankful that Brentford, have jumped in and said, we'll give you a chance. He can't go back to the Serie A now. He's not allowed to because of the pacemaker or whatever it is in
Yeah.
his heart. But yeah, maybe a big club will come for him.
Yeah, Conte seems to like him, so bring him back to Spurs. I mean, that'd be a nice
Good
little
point. Yeah,
reunion. I would really appreciate
if
that.
Conte is at Spurs.
Yeah. Oh my God, James. That's how you end the show with me. That's probably exactly what's going to happen. Conte, Kane gone. But anyway, one thing to keep in mind with that Eriksen being called up to Denmark, I think their second friendly in the international break is against Serbia in Denmark at the Parken where he collapsed. So that'll be a special moment. I think something you tune into if you possibly can, because I mean those moments really just don't happen.
Yeah. You know what? It's amazing football, right? So on one hand, we have that moment about to happen. On the other hand, we have fans tying themselves to goalposts during matches. That's why it's the best sport in the world, right?
Yeah, it really is the best sport in the world. And I love that clip of the guy with the bolt cutter trying to cut the tie off the guy's
I know.
neck.
And what gets me, right? So he's saying no to oil, right? Yeah, he's using a plastic tie.
Yeah,
Is
exactly.
that irony? I mean, come on, man. Use hemp or something, like Jesus.
I don't know what's going on with these guys. But anyway, that's it for Fast Money Football. Thank you, James, so much. Make sure you follow James at James Sharman on Twitter. You can follow me at TheRealBertV on Twitter as well. And please head over to parlay.tv for more parlay content. Good luck this weekend.